Good evening, everyone. It's time to dust off the mask and have a bit of a chat. Uh, this is going to be my first episode, so I think most people can understand I'm nervous for the most part. Uh, I'm sure you can tell there's no video, and that's because I want to, well, more or less remain faceless. It's a personal thing. I also just don't have a camera that can really record it. But for what I want to try and go for with this whole podcast is I'll be going for releasing 3 episodes later, but I want to do horror story readings, maybe off of Reddit or other sites that post horror stories, and see how that goes for people. Some other things might be to do game reviews, more or less just things that I've played and have the time to talk about, or maybe not even reviews, but just general discussions on them, like how fun they might be, certain characters in the games and how well they are portrayed, or in games where you create characters. That could be interesting. Another thing that I'd have to ask my own group for is talking about some of our D&D adventures. If you don't know what D&D is, it's Dungeons and Dragons. We usually have some pretty interesting stories for that. But again, that would have to be something I'd check with my own group, see if they're okay with that. Let me grab my phone. I had some stuff written down. Doo-doo. Where's my OneNotes? There we go. And another thing that I'd like to try and do in the future is interviews with other people, other content creators. Just, I feel like that would be a nice setting and things would probably be flowing much more naturally. Because, well, when you're starting out as a solo podcast like this, you're just staring at your computer screen pretty much the entire time. I don't have a lot of equipment at the moment. Right now, it's just my laptop and one screen to do everything with. So, it's a little hard to pull up things. So I'll probably just be reading off of my phone most of the time. But I think for now, I'll just tell you about my week. Some of the games I've played, well, my work life isn't very interesting, that's for sure. But maybe things that happened in some of the games I've played with my friends. Uh, and I think for right now, I'll tell you about something that happened recently in our D&D campaign. I'd have to write down a couple of things for the next upcoming ones, but this was probably the most interesting thing that I could really talk about right now. So, my week has been not exciting, but it definitely could have been better. Uh, in my area, we've had a lot of rain, a couple tornadoes passing through as well, and oh boy, I think we all know how it feels to deal with flooding. We're renovating the shower in the house, and well, we haven't quite gone to it, so we've just got this big hole where the piping is, and when it rains, oh boy, does that hole fill up, and then it leaks out. But because of the excessive amount of rain that we've had recently, it came up through the bathroom, it came out dirt of the sewage drain, so that's been a nightmare. And my room is in the basement of the place, so all my floorboards got soaked. It's just water underneath everything. I spent probably 3 minutes just with a towel wiping my floor over and over again. I'm like, why? Why is this not drying up? And I took a step back and I saw it bubbling through the the floorboard, and oh, I was like, well, that's just great. I can't clean this up now. So I just had to let it be, and the next morning I forgot about it, so I put down my foot, and now I've got wet socks. So that's something that would generally, I think, displease a lot of people. Then then after that, I just had my work, my usual work day, working 3 to 11. I just run a bandsaw for my work, and uh, well, this whole week we've basically been out of work, not because of the rain, but just because we've been doing a lot better in our processing and just getting everything throughout the day done. So my work schedule was full of nothing. I just had to sit around most of the time doing what I could, where I could, finding whatever I could possibly do. Have you guys ever had a week like that where you just get there and it's one of those slow weeks? Kind of looks like the audio might be a little high, so I'm gonna turn it down a bit. That might be good. And I'm sorry if the mic quality or audio quality is like up and down here and there and sounds a little weird. I don't have a proper space to do all this. It's just one of those things where you go out and give it a shot just because. So I'm really just holding it and adjusting it here and there. So if I can eventually find some place to actually get it settled down and everything should hopefully come out better. I think the next thing I'll try to talk about is games that I played. Yeah, I'm still talking about this week. So well, actually it's been the past month and a half, but this past week, me and two of my other friends have been going through the Demon's Souls remake. One friend is doing a mage build, and if you've ever played the Demon Souls remake, or just Demon Souls in general, you know magic is busted to a very high degree. If you can get your magic stat up to what it needs to be, there's quite a few bosses that won't stand up to what you can dish out. Right now, he's just running around with the basic spells, being, I believe, Firebolt and I think it's called Mage Bolt, but I'm not sure. I haven't played a mage character in well, not since Demon Souls came out. My other friend, well, to clarify or to put some clarity to it, we'll call them hmm, we'll call them Adrian and Marcus. Adrian's playing the mage character. When we usually play games like these, we'll usually always go for a mage first, and I forgot I forgot the second name that I said, so for now we'll just go with Mark. It's possible I even said that before, but Mark is playing a more or less Dex character knight build. He's the most experienced out of all of us with this game. He played it on the original PlayStation 3 when it first came out, or maybe not when it first came out, but he's played it since the PlayStation 3 days. And when I tell you he can name every single item on the ground, aside from ones that drop from the enemies, he can name every single item on that ground. It's it's quite impressive. It's the longest game he's ever played with. But yeah, he's playing a Dex Knight character. I think he called it his paladin character, but I'm not entirely sure on the details for there. We It's not something we really discussed. He just took a moment to do fashion soulsing, and that's more or less what he got to. Calls himself a knight paladin. What I'm playing is a character that I like to call Hefty Prime. Hefty Prime is pure strength and using the heaviest equipment in the game at all times. Right now, I only have access to the Dragon Bone Smasher, definitely the highest attack rating weapon in the game if you build for it right. Um, but unfortunately, it's not the heaviest weapon. That would be the Bram Hammer, but we can't get that just yet. Other than that, I'm wearing the entire Duskwood set because that is the heaviest armor, and Brushwood set. Sorry. And I'm also using the Brushwood large shield. I would use the tower shield, but I don't have access to that either. But we've been going through that for the past week so far, and when I say we have to take, I believe I used the name was Adrian, he's not the best at it. Of course, not to slander him too much, but he's never been the best at all of the Souls games. He's not terrible at them, but uh, he definitely has his weaknesses in it. But it's still fun. We get funny moments all the time. Like, well, it was funny for us, but it wasn't funny for Mark. But we recently just finished, no joke, maybe not even an hour ago, the what was his name? I think it was the Blind Hero. He wields a what was it? I'm gonna say it's a curved blade. It's not a scimitar. It could be a scimitar, but it's a curved blade that you can get in the game as well. But the process to do that is honestly it's ridiculous. But we first tried Mark's boss. That was great. We tried mine, and I just got obliterated from one attack because we didn't realize that the host holds priority aggro. So no matter who attacks him, he's going to prioritize the host of the gaming session. And boy, was that a nasty nasty surprise. So I wound up uh, dying pretty fast. Well, not fast. I'd say we got him down to about half of his health bar. But then we did Adrian's, and wow, that was bad. He died, I think, 4 times to the boss before we finally managed to beat him. And it didn't help that with this boss, when you attack him enough times, he'll scream out in anger. If you keep hitting him during that, he goes into a bit of a frenzied state and does a charge attack or changes up his combos. So he was playing a mage that was doing a very fast, rapid firing spells. So needless to say, it got angry quite often and pretty fast. Um, in Mark's fight, it was no issue. We figured out what we did wrong, and we were a bit more patient, but we kind of burned him down pretty quickly. On my attempt, after doing those two, because in the game of Demon Souls, you have to have an item that brings you back to life in a sense. Most of the time in the community, you should just stay in what we call the spirit form because the game uses a system called world tendency. The more you die in body form, the darker the world's tendency becomes, and that means certain enemies get stronger, and other new enemies appear where they're a glowing red version of them, and needless to say, they hit several times harder. But uh, that's that's that. For beating bosses and doing, I believe, certain quest lines, your world tendency can go up. And now that you have bright world tendency or good world tendency, or maybe it's positive world tendency, and when that happens, enemies start becoming weaker. They don't hit as hard, and I believe they also don't give as many. We got to Well, damn, I kind of lost track there. What was I saying? We did my world, and again after I died. So he was a little harder because you have to be in body form to summon other people who are in spirit form. So needless to say, what was his name? We'll just change it up. We'll say the mage character and the knight character or players. The mage character's boss became relatively harder and harder because he had died so many times to it. And mine was just a little harder, but we changed up our strategy a little bit in mine, where I would use an item that would coat my weapon in a magic damage type, and that's just a general typing of damage in the game. You have a few others, but for this instance, it was just an item that applied magic damage to mine. And in all three of the fights, I was the heaviest hitter because usually in the Demon Souls games, and I'll explain it later, but the From Software games, if you haven't heard of those would be Dark Souls, the Demon Souls, the Bloodborne, kinda Sekiro, and their newest ones being Elden Ring and Elden Ring Night Reign. So if you like checking those out, go ahead and check them out. They're fun games, but they're definitely difficult to say the least. But in generally in those strength builds usually hit the hardest out of most of them. Demon Souls, I'd say there's an argument for Magic just because of how busted it is in that older game since it was their first game like this from software, so they were still figuring out things. Um, but we managed to beat the boss after changing up our strategy, and then we unlocked the final area boss of that. And he, our mage friend, was done for the night. We had started playing the game around 10 o'clock and didn't finish until 3:30, 2:30. Right now, it's 4:09, so that's that. And yeah, this wasn't explained the best, and it was pretty awkward. But what I can talk about is our game before that being Bloodborne. Now, that game, unlike our mage friend, or sorry, unlike our knight friend in the other game in Demon Souls, this is what we consider to be my game. Bloodborne is. I got to play it back in 2022, and I just dominated in that game like no one's business. When we get to it, we've got some funny stories to talk about there when my other friend who was the one that was really good at Demon Souls watched me play it. Oh, some of his reactions were glorious. But we played we played Bloodborne for a month and a half before Demon Souls. In that one, my friend played well, we all basically started out as dex builds, and one of my friends, who was the mage from the other talk wanted to try playing a mage in Bloodborne. Well, what's the issue with that? Bloodborne doesn't really have a mage class or really good magic system. It's mostly a bunch of items that scale off of a certain statistic called arcane in there. And they're very far and few between. Like, it's hard to come across them until you're much later in the game, so he had a difficult time. But our veteran of the Demon Souls was playing I believe it was also a dex build in that one. It might have been a quality build. And I was also playing dex a dex blood tinge build. Blood tinge is another statistic, uh, and if need be, I'll probably go over that later. It was because the reason I decided to do that is because I'd played the game several times. On my main character in the game, I'm on New Game Plus 5 or 6, and I realized I'd never beaten the game with one starter weapon because when I originally played, I started with a weapon called the Threaded Cane. The Threaded Cane acts as a straight sword, but the gimmick of Bloodborne is every weapon is a second weapon, so it can be transformed into a different one. The Thread Cane gets turned into a whip, and I'd played majority of the game with that. Then, when I hit the DLC of Bloodborne, I switched to a weapon called Simon's Bowblade, and then I found a weapon that I fell in love with and continued to play with that for the rest of the game and several new games after that, which is Lady Maria's Rakuyo. It's kind of like a katana straight sword with a dagger at the hilt. When you transform it, they become uh, a straight sword and a dagger in both hands. Otherwise, they're just one. And I just never looked back from there. But when I start a new game, I like to just switch it up and play other weapons that I never got to play before. And this time, when we were doing our annual From Software Soulsborne series run, I decided I'd play with the Thread Cane fully throughout the game. And just because of how all of our builds started, we all picked the Thread Cane and going through each of the areas, it was very, very interesting. You never realize how much uh, a stagger potential a weapon could have when you have three of them together, because for about half the game, it was the three of us with Thread Cane, and bosses they basically couldn't touch us because they couldn't move. We kept staggering them over and over and over again. Uh, and my friend who was the mage, he eventually, what weapon did he choose? I believe he eventually settled for Simon's Bowblade. So he basically wound up completely abandoning the mage idea in there just because it's not impossible, but it's really, really hard to work with. So then he wound up running a more dex build. Our veteran friend for Demon Souls wound up with, I think he actually wound up being more of an arcane person because he decided to go with the Moonlight Greatsword instead. So he was Dex before, then he swapped to more of a strength and arcane build, which I think is kind of funny how those two just completely flipped scripts on each other. And like I said before, I just stuck with the good old trusty cane sword. Huh. Apologies. I have a bit of a cough. It's just something I've always had for years and decades. So in future episodes and possibly even later down in this episode's line, you might hear me coughing, or there's like just a sudden quiet and I haven't figured out how to edit that. Uh, that's me turning away and coughing, kind of like that. Um, let's see. Yeah, again, it's been a while since we played that, so I don't have too many details on what it all went down, because we did have a few days where we just didn't play that and kept going along. So some details are kind of fuzzy. Moving on to a different topic. Uh, YouTube Shorts. One YouTube Shorts that I've been really getting invested into lately is, what was his name? I think it's Mad Ozzy. I'll double check that. Yeah, Mad. Apologies. Mad Ozzy. He's got this skit series going on about the only human on a multi-species alien ship, and a lot of them is funny because he has humans being known as what they call, or what the aliens in this universe he's made call, a death worlder, and it's some of the most benign things about humans that completely baffle the other alien races or are just incredibly deadly to them. Like, I think one of his more recent ones was he was eating out of a cup of yogurt, and a different Death Worlder wanted to try it. And his character in that's going, I don't know if you should do that. But the alien's like, I'm also another Death Worlder, so I should be fine. And he thinks that's reasonable enough. So the alien eats the yogurt and he dies. Like, whatever the chemical composition of yogurt is, it apparently liquefied his entire insides, making him just a bag of soup in his description, and it's pretty funny. Another one he has is it's a super, super advanced alien species, but somehow they've never thought about locks or advanced locks. So most of them are very simple padlocks, and he's able to just rob them blind because they're super advanced, but they have padlocks securing everything, so he can just lockpick them open. It's really funny, and I think his newest one was, what was it? I can't remember his newest one, unfortunately, but another one was his character cuts his finger and the aliens are freaking out like, oh, we need to get you to the medic bay so we can get the nanomachines to repair you. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm fine. It's like, look, the bleeding's already stopped. It's like, humans can regenerate? that has never been heard of in all recorded history. It's just really funny because if you think about it, aliens should be super advanced species, and in most media that we have, aliens are completely unknown creatures. They surpass all that we could have ever thought. But in his world, we're the absolute freakazoids because apparently every other species except for a very few select kinds lived on a paradise world where they've never had any of these kind of problems. And if you think about it, maybe no, that's more of a political topic, so I'll stay away from that. I don't want this to be a political podcast. It's just a podcast to chat about things. Eh, hear spooky stories later, or just games that I've played so far and will probably replay to freshen up for this, and even new games, ones that you might recommend to me, if that's the kind of content you want to see. Let's see. I guess another thing to talk about that happened this week for me was a friend of mine has been staying over at the house for quite some time, and we've been watching an anime show called Danmachi. That's the Japanese one, and most fans of the series call it that just because it's a lot shorter and it doesn't make people cock their heads at the name, because the English name for Danmachi is it okay to pick up girls in a dungeon? I know how that sounds. It sounds, if you're someone who's into anime, it sounds like a thing where this guy's going around and trying to pick up chicks, as the title suggests. But in reality, it's not like that at all. It is, I'd say, for the most part, very wholesome, a little bit of fan service, but that's just because it's anime. Most anime out there, especially newer ones, are gonna have fan service. But he had never seen the show. No, that's kind of wrong. He'd seen a few seasons, but he never finished it for whatever reason. I don't recall. But I said I'd watch it with you. I'll tell you about some things that have been different from the light novels and manga compared to the show, things that were cut, because Danmachi is my favorite media of all time. No joke. So I've been reading the manga for what it has. I've been reading the sister series, Sword Artorio, and I've been not recently, but keeping up with the light novel series on Audible. But we've been going through that, and I know he can hear me because he's in the second room. But the Amazonesses in that show, he is so down bad for, and I can't blame him either. My favorite character in the show is an Amazoness girl called Tiona. I don't know, it's just that spunk she's got. But I believe he's been enjoying it. We've gone to season 4 right now, and spoiler warnings. Season 4 is the one where he gets trapped in the dungeon. I don't think I actually finished explaining what Danmachi was. Man, this is all over the place. But I guess just to reiterate on what I had said before, the name is totally misleading. It's about a character named Bell Cornell. He wanted to be a hero. He grew up with his grandfather after losing his parents, which gets explained much later down in the series, but his grandfather kept reading him stories about heroes. So that was all he could ever think about, to be a hero. And one day his grandfather gets killed in the mountains. So he decides to take his grandfather's advice and go to the city of Orario, the city of heroes. And what's interesting there is the author uses a kind of leveling system that's similar to video games, but in this world that he's created, he also has gods. A lot of the gods that we have in our own mythologies, like Zeus, Hera, no, that's not, Odysseus isn't a god, but Demeter, Freya, a lot of gods like those. And to be an adventurer, you need to enter into one of their familias by them grafting a what they call falna onto your body, pretty much your back. And when you go out and do your adventurings, that's how you gain the experiences from those battles, being running away, attacking, dodging things. It all contributes to your experience, and you level up that way. And it's in the story that he's posed, it is incredibly hard to level up. For most, about 70 to 80% of the entire population of adventurers in Danmachi is level 2. And for most people, it takes between 2 to 5 years to even get to level 2. But Bell, as he is the main character, has something special. He gets saved by another character called Eyes Wallenstein. He basically falls in love with her, and he eventually realizes that he is too weak to stand by her side. So he decides he will tell her how he feels when he reaches her level. And for some reason, that desire is so incredibly strong with him that he develops a skill. Skills are things that you can just gain get by adventuring. The system for it's kind of weird, but it's all really dependent on what you've done in your adventures and your emotions to an extent. How you feel about something can influence the type of skills that you get to an extent. Well, the skill that he developed from this was called Realis Freeze, and it expedites his growth. The stronger he feels about wanting to be by this character's side, by Aiza's side, the faster he will gain experience. And so within a month and a half, he manages to reach level 2. And as you recall what I said, most adventurers don't get to level 2 except within 3 to 5 years. The next fastest person to ever do that was Eyes Wallenstein within 1 year. So needless to say, he made quite the commotion when he reached level 2 in only a month and a half. But that was a total side tangent that I didn't need to get on. Um, it's the story follows his whole adventures. We see everything from his point of view and how he gets to where he goes, as things go. I know, Dusty Mac, you're just talking about what's obvious because that's how all stories go. But I'm just pointing out that that's how it goes and that the title is just very misleading. He doesn't really pick up girls in the dungeon. Well, I guess he technically does, but it all makes sense for the most part. It's just a lot of people he meets and makes friends with, and a good majority of them just are females. Yeah. So yeah, that's a quick explanation on what Danmachi is, and my friend and I watching that. I guess another thing that I can talk about is card games. Uh, just because, yeah, this is my introduction to you all to figure out how what I want to do with this channel and where we go with it. But the card game that I'm currently very into with a lot of my friend groups is the Digimon TCG. If you haven't seen Digimon, it's a relatively older anime. I think it might be 20 years old. Hell, it might even be more than that. Actually, yeah, no, I think Digimon came out in like 1998, so it's probably reaching about 30 years old at this point. But Digimon is digital monsters. They live in a computer program in a completely different world that is influenced by our internet. And it's pretty interesting because you have a whole like leveling system in that game where you start with an egg or a level 3 Digimon. Then if you meet the requirements, you can digivolve them to their next stage, and it goes up to level 7. Level 7s aren't too common to entirely see unless you're playing a specific Digimon called Omnimon, which is completely dominating the format for the most part. Honestly, I'm kind of sick of Omnimon decks. But they're pretty interesting. A lot of them have their own niches and play styles that are very unique to one another, and the unlike some other, well, no, like most card games, they have a resource system, which is memory. It's a counter that goes between 10 and 10 on each sides with a 0 in the middle, and each card has their own memory cost. One for hard playing them onto the field, which is usually pretty high. So like for a level 3, that could be between 3 memory and 4 memory. And as the levels go up, the memory cost goes up, with a lot of them reaching incredibly high memory costs. Like some level 4s, or no, level 5s can hit like 7 memory, or even sometimes 10 memory, depending on the type. But they all have a Digivolve cost, which is significantly lower. So, like on a level 3, those are usually zeros, unless they're a very, very specific type, which then sometimes they cost 1, and then it'll go up from there as well, being like 3 to 4 memory then. And you usually don't see memory for digivolving on the higher levels to go higher than a 5. There are a few out there that have 7. Uh, like the one of them that I have. I like playing a Digimon deck called Diaboromon, and one of its level 7s is 7 memory to digivolve it, and that in the game is quite a lot. But I think I'll stop talking about Digimon, and another one of the card games that I do like playing is Magic the Gathering. Wow, how unique. Magic the Gathering. We've all heard it. We know how long it's been around. And for those of you who don't know, it is a very old card game. Uh, yeah, I'd say very old card game at this point. But one of the main decks that I like doing in that one is the rat deck. And it's just because usually you have a limit to how many copies of one card you can have, unless, like the rat deck, they have cards that specifically state you can have as many copies of this card in your deck that you want. So it's just these super uh small cards that you just keep throwing bodies at, and I just find it very funny because there's a few cards in Magic the Gathering that allow you to play more and more of a certain card through an effect called Ripple, or yeah, I think it's Ripple. And well, with the rats, since they can have as many as you want there, the second you play that, and the card allows you to look at whichever card you're using. It can allow you to look at the top number of cards you have, and if you have any copies there, you can play them. And then you just keep doing that, because every time that card gets played, it reactivates the effect to search for more of them. So if you get lucky or just have enough of them in the deck, you can, in one turn, go from 1 rat on the field to having 50 rats on the field. And because there's only 2 rat cards, I believe, that say you can have an unlimited number, and the one I like using is called Rat Colony. Rat Colony is a little special because they have an ability that is their attack power increases with the number of rats you have on the field. In Magic the Gathering, cards are donated, or not donated. You can only, how do I describe this? All the cards have a cost that you pay with mana, which are just these rocks basically that have power that allow you to play them. Rats only cost three three of these resources, and they all have different colors for stuff. So you've got like red color for mountains, blue for water, and swamps for black. And rats are 2 black and 1 of any color, and they have 0 power, which is their attack rating, and 1 defense, which is how much damage they can take before they die. But like I was saying, rat colonies bolster in power depending on how many of them there are, with the exception of the card itself. So if you have 2 rat colonies, they only gain power from the other rat colony. So if you have 50 of them, you have 49 power. So that can go really out of hand if people don't take you out of the game before they realize that, oh, he's got a game on board. Another card game that I used to be into was Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm sure lots of people have heard about Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. And my 3 favorite decks in there, those were the Amazonesses, the Trap Tricks, and the last one that I really got into was one called Spellcrafters. And that's really about it for card games. A few shows that I've been into lately have been the Has Been Hotel series and their other series, Hell of a Boss. Those have always been a riot. They've got good songs in them. Some of them might not be for everyone, and, you know, some of the topics on the show wouldn't be for everyone as well, because Has Been a Hotel is about the Princess of Hell, Lucifer Morningstar's child. She wants to go and rehabilitate sinners. Pretty interesting idea. And you follow her adventures going through that, and you watch her mess up a lot. She's kind of like a Disney princess in hell, which is very interesting. But it's a good comedy, and it's got some ideas in it that are definitely worth thinking about. The other series that I mentioned was Hell of a Boss, and that's just uh, some native borns to hell imps, and they have a business called the Immediate Murder Professionals. They're just hitmen. Um, and you'd think that's all to it, but it's actually got a lot of drama and stuff with uh, relationships and how bad they can go and how they can make a difference for themselves in a super shitty place called hell. Another show that I was into recently was, let me pull up my Crunchyroll to figure out what it was called again. It was Roll Over and Die. That one I've been enjoying because it's about a hero or a girl who was nominated to be a hero, and her skill, or maybe if you want to call it hero ability, is reversal. So everything has the reverse effect on her. So anything that would make her stronger makes her weaker. Anything makes her weaker makes her really strong. It's been an overall good watch and everything. Another one I've been watching. These are all animes, by the way. Is In the Clear Moonlight Dust. It's a romance show, but the main character is a very handsome looking woman, and everyone calls her the prince, but she really doesn't like it until she meets someone else who is also called Prince. But he actually just doesn't really fit the description. It's more so just on his looks. But the show goes on to tell the story of how those two wind up becoming a couple and how awkward the female protagonist is versus how, I guess I want to say, almost say, innocent the male protagonist is. He's never really felt well, neither of them have really felt romance in any sense. So it's them discovering what romance is. And I think that's a pretty good premise for it. Um, so I've got any movies that I've watched recently. It's What movies have I watched recently? Actually, it doesn't seem I've actually watched any movies recently, but some shows that I am planning to try to get to recently is one called The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity. I haven't seen too much of it, but I've seen clips here and there. The Devil May Cry anime, I'm gonna give season 2 a watch on that. I have played the original run of the Devil May Cry series, and well, to be blunt, yeah, the you definitely have to take them as their own separate mediums. The anime isn't bad. It's got some okay to decent comedy. The action scenes are, I'd honestly say, top notch, but comparing them to the games is something you shouldn't do. You should take them as their own separate form of things because they go into some topics that really weren't in the game. See, well, I'm running to about an hour now, so I think I'll finish up with the last two thoughts. So I'll talk about why I decided to do podcasting. And I don't know. You could say you might think it's shallow in some cases, but I was at an anime convention a couple months ago and I was just walking around just handing out pocket to people. It's a whole thing. I did it on a whim before, and then I was just like, you know what? I'll just buy like 6 of these jumbo boxes and just quietly walk up to people, stick the box out to them, and just let them grab it. I had a few funny reactions with one person just uh with a shocked face point at me, then point at herself, then go for me, point back to her and everything. It probably one of the funniest reactions I had there, but that's besides the point. I was walking around after doing that, and I just came across this panel hall that was called VTuber Village. I I've seen VTubers. I'm sure some of you all have seen VTubers as well. They've grown in a lot of popularity and all that. And I just said, screw it. I'll check it out, see what it's like. And I stood in line to talk to 2 of them. One of them, unfortunately, I can't remember what her channel name was, but she seemed like a nice person. I had a bit of a chat with her. But the other one that I had met was Corey Ojo. We had a good talk, and she said to me that I had a really nice voice and that I should think about going into podcasting. And I really don't know how to describe it. It hit a chord with me, and I thought, oh, why not? Like, yeah, let's just give it a shot, see how it goes, and just do my darndest to keep it up and go for what I can do. And I guess a big dream would definitely be to have her appear on this podcast and have a good chat with each other, have a good interview, and well, hopefully have a much more coherent podcast than. But yeah, that was pretty much the whole inspiration for this. Just she told me, I have a nice voice and should think about doing a podcast, and well, here we are. So to close things out, uh, I know this first episode is incredibly awkward. It's a complete mess. I can fully understand that. I honestly really have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not a very interesting person. I don't have a lot of stories or topics that I can really talk about, but I want to give this a good go. I want to give it a try, and if you're all willing to stay with me and go through these growing pains to figure out everything, I'd really appreciate that. I wouldn't say that I want to go big, but I'd like to have a community that can relate to this stuff. Just have us chat about things eventually and figure out everything for this channel, what we want to go for, whether it just being something that's completely talking about horror stories, talking about video games, even card games, and like I said before, Dungeons and Dragons topics about, just the adventures that my group has had. And I do think I promised about talking about our latest session, so after this little real talk, I'll go into that. But yeah, I know this is more or less a mess, uh, but I think that's what's real about it, even possibly even relatable. It's something that I'm definitely far exceeding out of my own comfort zone for, but I have the motivation to do it. I'm not sure how many videos I'll be able to record all the time because my my actual work life is pretty busy for the most part, and I usually have very, very little time to do it. So while I'm gonna try to record as many as I can for the month, just to have, you know, a, an amount of things for you to listen to, uh, my my releasing schedule might be maybe one or two a week, or not a week, a month, one or two videos a month, just because I don't have as much time as I would like to have for this. But life is life. We all need a job to do, to pay our bills, to get food and all that stuff. But again, I'd really appreciate if you'd like to stay and go through this journey of even self-discovery, uh, with this podcast, and see what kind of community we could possibly build. But I'll move on from the sappy stuff and get to the story I believe I promised about Dungeons and Dragons last week. So, to start things off, if you don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is, it's a tabletop role playing game. You use dice to determine pretty much everything that happens, and you have a player who is the DM. He runs the whole thing. He builds the world story, if that's what he wants to do, or he runs what's called a module, which is just a book that has a pre-written story. Our DM has been DMing for over a decade. So most of the stuff he runs is his own creations. And right now we are playing what we call, it'll sound weird, but it'll make sense in a second, but the Child's campaign. Uh, what that means is all the characters that the players are playing are the children of our last characters. This is going to be their story, them getting away from basically the reputation of our parents, finding our own places in the world and making a name for ourselves in that sense. In our most recent session, though, we were tasked with going to a kingdom that our parents had prior had rocky relations with. Uh, they kind of demolished the city, and now we're going there to try to mend things with the city of Aralaxis, which in our Dungeons and Dragons campaign is a city that's been around for quite some time, made by actually our DM's favorite character, and he, because of D&D reasons, he became very, very powerful god. So he can't really do too much in our world anymore, since he kind of has to exist outside the boundaries. Because in D&D you have gods, like Zeus, Hera, kind of like in the Danmachi talk that we had before. A lot of those pantheons from our world in there. But there's another sect above that called over deities, which are like the gods of gods. And his character, through many, many years of playing, eventually reached that status. But now we were tasked with basically repairing a relationship with a city that he had a hand in demolishing, to put it simply. Uh, So our DM is playing that god's son named Riley. So he is the Prince of Aralaxis, so he's going there for diplomatic reasons. one of my other friends is playing a character called Elenia, I believe it is, and she is the daughter of the dragon god. Then we have uh, Shiro, and I can't remember his other character's name, but they were sent as an escort to Eleni and Riley, as well as another character called Seven, who is a he's not really a war forward, but he is kind of like a robotic character with an interesting premise to him. He is three different people in one body, and each of those different personalities has their own class. One being a barbarian, one being a ranger, and the other being a what was it? A cleric. Another person is playing a. It's kind of like a bard, but we made our own. Well, our DM made his own class called a dancer, and that's what this other player is playing as. I can't remember that character's name, but they're also a guard. Then we have three other characters that are an espionage team. One of them is my character, Cinder. He is a alchemist wizard. Then we have Damon, who is a jester bard. If you don't know what a jester is, it is an old D&D class, one that was actually originally published in Dragon Magazine. I don't remember what issue it was. I want to say maybe issue 49, but I could be way off on that point. But it's a very fun and interesting class, one that I've actually played the most in all of the time I've played D&D. And then we have another one who's the brother to another character, but I can't remember what exactly they were playing. Uh, but when we were going through, we had discovered that the town's guards were actually all part of an organization known as a thieves guild. And boy, I managed to get my character deep within their ranks by bullshitting my ass off. The character Shiro wound up uh in a similar situation, but he found the thieves guild's leaders who was also the captain of the guard of that city. He found his office and took a ledger from them. Well, that ledger happened to be trapped, so if it were ever taken away or opened, it would explode. And that definitely set off a couple of alarm bells. So when we finally get everyone to start agreeing to the diplomatic sides and telling them or trying to convince them that we are here to help and all that, the captain of the guard starts to do a coup. Well, that's bad for me and for Shiro and for Damon because, well, they discovered Shiro came in the same carriage as my character and Damon. So now we get kidnapped and put into their dungeon, basically, and my character, being alignment-wise chaotic evil, really didn't like getting backstabbed like that since I was making progress in the Thieves Guild as someone they believed was on their side. So now my character's gonna go for some payback. So we managed to break out of there as the coup up top is going out, since we heard the guards tell that the captain was starting now on the coup. So needless to say, not a smart decision. They left their captives alone in the basement or in the dungeon. So we managed to break out of our restraints, and I decide I'm gonna blow up their headquarters. Because I'm an alchemist, I have access to um certain items, some of which of the explosive variety. So I start saying that all up, but as D&D is a game of chance and rolling numbers, I discover something that we weren't supposed to discover for quite a few levels later. And it's a painting of the guard captain captain slash thieves guild leader, and it turns out to be a magic portal. I, trying to investigate it, wind up getting sucked into that portal, but before that, I tried to tell Damon, who's with me, to stay put. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, just blow the place up. Well, he doesn't listen, and he winds up a few minutes later deciding to tie a knot onto, I think it was like a chalice and throw it in, but because he failed his dex save, he winds up panicking and the portal sucks him in through, with the rope tied chalice. Shiro, wound up being with us as well, and he tries to, stop Damon from getting sucked in, which only winds up sucking him in as well. So now we've got 3 people who are stuck in a place we don't know, because as it turns out, that portal comes out of an opening the size of a pearl. So we, needless to say, take a lot of damage coming out of there, and the opening disappears after it lets out whoever traveled through it go. So now we are stuck. Now you may be thinking, for those of you that do know D&D, well, why didn't you just use some spells to get out of there? Good idea. I did try that, because I am a level 5 wizard, but I did manage to get my hands on a magic item, being a particular spell book. I don't remember the exact name. I might actually have it in one of my Discord channels, so you'll give me a moment there. But the book had a plethora of spells in them. First one I tried to use was plane shift to see if it took us to a different plane and if we can just use that to get us out of there. Well, turns out when you're on the same plane, the spell doesn't work and it fizzles. Luckily, as we discovered when trying to look up the rulings for what would specifically happen, it doesn't actually waste the spell from the book, so I didn't manage to lose that spell, which is good. However, I don't have any other. I don't know how far we are in this cave system that we were dropped off in, or where exactly we are. So the next best thing I could do is use one of the other spells from this book that I got to copy spells from, which was Wish. So I worded the wish in a way that would allow us to just be put back to the entrance of the city that we were at, which was New Midstadt. I didn't mention that before, but yeah, we were sent to a kingdom called New Midstadt to fix relations and prevent a possible uprising coup and invasion of Parallaxis. But yeah, I tried to use the wish spell to get us out of there, and it goes off, but it winds up getting absorbed into the walls. That's not a natural thing. That is a very bad thing to happen, because as we would later find out through exploring the cavern that we were stuck in, it would be the lair of what's known as a Draco Lich. What is a Draco Lich? For those of you who don't know, it is an undead creature. I'm sure we all know what undead are. We've seen them in plenty of media. It's not exactly a zombie, but it's a animated skeleton dragon with the soul of a dragon that was in it. Now, the difference between it being an undead dragon and a Draco Lich is that they're highly powerful, high caster magicians as well, or wizards. What we would later find out is that this dungeon is keeping this Draco Lich alive because it's embedded into the ceiling of a large cavern opening in this cave, and it absorbs all magic that's cast in it, and it gains that magic cast as a spell-like ability. So now this Draco Lich has Wish. That's a big problem, because this Draco Lich can just cast it multiple times. Now, I know that sounds unfair on a on a D&D standpoint. But our dungeon master he's fair. He's not just gonna constantly cast wish on us all the time. He will use it strategically, so it's bad that it has it, but it's not going to be used poorly. But we're still stuck in this cave, and we just now find that it's a Draco Lich's lair. And we realize we're kind of boned, pun intended. Damon and Shiro both attempt to try to use invisibility to sneak past because we can see two other paths in the cavern to take. And it wasn't a bad idea until you find out that Draco Liches have the innate ability to see invisible creatures. So it immediately notices them and says, uh, uh, what cowardice acts, not even bothering to show yourselves? I have no reason to even speak with you. My character was hanging out in back because, well, he's a wizard and he can't cast spells in this place, so he didn't have any way of sneaking past. He was just gonna wait for the other two to check out the other pathways and come back. Well, now we hear this Draco Lich telling these two that he can see them, and he uses a breath attack to knock them prone, or knock them down. Just because, again, this is something we weren't supposed to find for quite some time, and the average level of our party is between 4 to 5, so needless to say, this dragon's fire breath just knocks them out immediately. Unfortunately, they have what's known as regeneration. In D&D, you have different stats. One of them is called Constitution. It dictates your health and certain rolls, but if your Constitution is high enough, you also get regeneration. So you gain 1 HP back every round. A round is considered to be 6 seconds in D&D, if you didn't know. Yeah, that's right. So they wind up, after being completely knocked down, getting back up. The Draco Lich, being a highly powerful wizard as well, means he has high intelligence. So he recognizes the regeneration, so he uses the wish spell to get rid of their regeneration. My bad. I accidentally gave him wish. But to be fair, we didn't know it was the lair of a Draco Lich. And we were just trying to escape, and because the first spell fizzled, it didn't get absorbed into the cavern wall, so we didn't know that what would happen, so my next spell being Wish, to try and get us out of here, really didn't help us in the long run. But he winds up knocking Shiro and Damon down, but then the Draco Lich decides to cast Fireball on them since they try to run away, but Damon has a magical item called I don't know if it's a standard one, but you can make magic items in D&D, so the DM, through one of the character's parents, gave Damon a Ring of Turning, or Volley. In older D&D, Volley is a spell that when you have a spell that has a saving throw cast upon you, it returns to sender, basically, and if they don't make the save for the spell, they get hit by it. So the dragon does casts Fireball at them, and Damon volleys it back at them. He did not like that. So, Shiro, being I believe he's I think I remember now. He's a thief, and he triple dashes away because you have a standard action of dash. As a rogue, you can just dash an additional time, I believe. And I believe they can also use their bonus action to dash again. I might be wrong on that, but he was able to use the dash action 2 or 3 times. Either way, he uses that to get out of there. So now the dragon only has one target because Damon's action was to use the volley ring. Well, now the dragon decides, I don't like that, so he casts Feeble Mind on Damon. If you don't know what Feeble Mind does, it reduces the target's intelligence and charisma to 1. As said before, intelligence and charisma are a statistic for your character, like constitution. So needless to say, he basically became a vegetable on the ground. And then we had to wait just to see what would happen, and the dragon decides, well, I know where Shiro went, so I'm going to cast a different spell to block off the entrance he came from. Well, now we're separated from our friend and we can't get to him. I am completely useless in this situation, trying to think of anything I could do to possibly help. But then Shiro pulls out a move we weren't expecting and starts praying to his mother, who is a different character from a past campaign that wound up becoming what a god of cryptids, specifically being like magical beasts, so things like displacer beasts, dragons, um, and other creatures like that. I can't remember most of them off the top of my head. But she immediately answers because that's her baby boy, and we're in a very desperate situation, which we possibly could have beat, but not with the 3 people we had. So now we have the god of cryptids, Nox, show up, and she listens to her kid, says he doesn't call enough, or she says to Shiro that he doesn't call enough, and she's a little upset with him over that. But she sees that her, I believe, relationship-wise, Damon is Shiro's cousin, so Nox sees her niece in a really bad way, and she walks into the room. Because she's a god, she has certain immunities to certain things, and she's able to effortlessly get past the spell that's blocking off the entrance, and goes, "You hurt my nephew, or nephew. You hurt my nephew. I'm going to kill you." And you couldn't even call it a fight, but she completely obliterates this Draco Lich and prevents it from doing Draco Lich things, which is usually when Draco Liches are slain, they can just revive themselves in the corpse of a different creature. However, Nox just decides to obliterate its soul, so now it can't come back at all. It is gone forever, and we somehow managed to make it out of there alive. Of course, because you didn't hear that, because Shiro hit the panic button, we didn't get XP for that encounter, sadly enough. And I understand why, if you have the if you can call your god mom to come down and solve your problem, you kind of can't get the XP for that. But yeah, that's what happened, and a very messy explanation of what happened in our last campaign. Well, with that, I've reached over an hour, well, about an hour and a half of runtime for this podcast, so I'll be ending it here. So it's time to take off the mask and let it collect some dust.